So I recently completed Daemon X Machina, Titanic, Scion, and honestly, it's a ton of fun. I wanted to speak on it since I don't see anyone really doing that as much. It's a really cool game and I just want more people to see that. This isn't really a review from me, but if you want a recommendation, then yes, please go buy it. It's awesome. Especially if you're into mecha or anime at all. I will also go into spoiler territory for the story, so I wanted to give a heads up on that as well. To begin, there are not too many mecha games I've played that I can really point to that compare to Titanic Scion. Most of my experience are just a few games like Little Battler's Experience, Custom Robo, and Xenoblade Chronicles X. I loved all of these games, so it did eventually lead me to try out the original Daemon X Machina. Now, I won't say that I dislike the original Daemon X Machina, but as of the writing of the script, I also haven't finished it either. It didn't quite 100% click with me, I suppose. The game honestly felt like it had a ton of depth in its combat and its movement, which felt really nice. I even love all of the different combination of weapons there were to try, but the entire game structure is mission-based, and a lot of those missions are extremely quick, so you aren't necessarily given a ton of room or incentive to explore that depth most of the time. I assumed it was like that because it was on the Nintendo Switch at the time, and being able to bang out missions like that on the go was probably the appeal there. The game also let you exit the mech to fight on foot, but unlike Xenoblade X, it was trash. The story was probably the biggest offender for me. Not that I think it was bad per se, but rather it was executed in such a way that was incomprehensible to me personally. This usually meant that if a big reveal happened, it typically just went over my head because I couldn't follow what was happening. Any intended payoff to its events would be completely lost on me. It is the type of game where I would have to read a synopsis on a wiki somewhere to make sense of it. It's like they only gave you 10 episodes of a 50-episode series and expected you to understand it. Outside of that, the characters are all just tropes that don't receive enough screen time long enough for me to really appreciate them beyond the surface level. I don't even remember their names. Despite all this, I didn't dislike my time playing the game, but it definitely needed improvements. And of course, the reason I brought all of this up is because Titanic Scion more or less remedies these things for me. To begin with the story, Titanic Scion takes place several hundred years after the events of the original Daemon X Machina. Here, its setting is a post-apocalyptic Earth, its surface ravaged by a great war between humanity and mutated non-human beings simply known as Outers. This war eventually brought forth a revolution for the Outers, a rise to a strict military regime through the Sovereign Axiom, who would be used to control and subjugate humanity's home on the surface of the Earth, and whose supreme leaders, also known as the Trinitas, would separate the surface from their own orbital paradise, known as the Garden. You play as a self-insert Outer who escaped captivity from the Axiom's experimentation thanks to your best friend, Nerve. You then crash land on the surface of the Earth after Nerve sacrifices himself to ensure your safety and meet up with the Reclaimers, a human rebel group who would fight against the Axiom's rule. Motivated by vengeance, and despite the ire that humans and Outers typically hold for each other, the protagonist decides to join the Reclaimers to save Nerve and destroy the Sovereign Axiom entirely. On the Earth's surface, the gameplay essentially drops you into a large open-world-like environment where you're free to explore and travel wherever your arsenal can take you. There are only 3 biomes to explore though: the desert, the forest, and the mountains. While these environments are very large in scale, the scope feels far less ambitious than something like Xenoblade X. Not only was that game much larger, but every continent there is connected seamlessly without any loading screens whatsoever. This is pretty incredible to think about when you consider that Nintendo and Monolith achieved this on the Wii U over a decade ago. And despite having access to stronger hardware now, neither Daemon X Machina or any subsequent Xenoblade games managed to do this, so you can probably get an idea of the scale we're dealing with here. I know there are quite a few who dislike the environments in Titanic Scion for being sort of bland, barren, or potentially forgettable. In some ways it is. Not only do all 3 biomes have generic names to them, but there aren't many strong, memorable landmarks in the game I can think of beyond the Femto Sandstorm in the desert and the infamous tower in the forest. Now, if you've played the game, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Though, considering the game's setting is the aftermath of a nearly century-long war following up 400 years of humanity's colonization of the planet and extreme prejudice against Outers, I think they nailed the idea of their own science fiction apocalypse pretty well. Whether it's the broken-down abandoned buildings hinting at past civilizations, the large alien-like femto trees littered around like giant weeds that clearly do not belong, the immortal nests that warp the surface into what I can only describe as flesh wounds on the Earth, or even the abandoned research facilities with failed experiments piled to the ceiling and entire chambers designed to dispose of those bodies with corrosion and fire. This not only showcases the type of cruelty that is experienced on this planet, it is also something that could have easily happened to the protagonist if Nerve didn't save them. It all works to sell you the idea of a self-inflicted apocalypse without saying a single word of dialogue to you about it. I even like how bosses from the previous game make an appearance as random encounters that you can just discover out here in the world. Immortals who were once the world's apex predators are now treated as out-of-place artifacts, relics of a bygone era, showcasing just how much humanity, arsenal technology, and even the world itself has evolved past them. It even makes sense that arsenals in Titanic Scion are smaller now. It makes them easier to mass-produce to the point where, much like smartphones, nearly everyone has one. People even use their arsenals to compete at the Coliseum for sport. This is the type of environmental storytelling seen in games like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom that add more to their world building and allow for their relatively simplistic stories to carry more weight behind them. The combat in this game is very freeform and fun, much like the last game, though offense and movement feel far more committal and deliberate, opposed to how loose and snappy the original game felt. It's hard to convey this without playing both, but the difference feels like night and day to me. Fighting is still plenty satisfying regardless. Much like the last game, the weapons list is pretty massive, but they've added quite a bit more. If I had to pick a favorite, it's probably Yaiba's katanas, the beam sabers, or that silly laser cannon that the motorcycle gets for no reason.
I suppose you don't need my aid.
Also, the handguns are pretty absurd. Practically everything is designed around combat since it is the bulk of what you do. Even the materials earned in mining zones are just used for research and development for weapons and parts. I find that the combat in Titanic Scion really rewards understanding your arsenal's movement, positioning, weight class, and weapon choice, and also understanding what you as a player want out of it. These mechanics are all things that can be intuited at a glance and can be adjusted to suit your playstyle, whether it's a heavy mech with the most dangerous weapons you can think of, or something lightweight to keep yourself mobile, or something in the middle of those. Outside of overloading your arsenal's memory capacity, there's no wrong way to go about customization here. When I played online with friends, I used a pseudo-support build, where I would largely use flame missiles, the acid gun, and pulse grenades for constant status helmets, while also providing the team with healing with the repair shot ability. It was honestly really fun, and I still do it even now. Oh, and yes, the game has online functionality, which allows you to do practically everything together, including the entire story, and I had a ton of fun doing it. I'm only scratching the surface of how the combat feels, but it's a fun time when everything comes together. Boss encounters are basically the best part of this game for me. Tactics that you would use on regular enemies are also possible on bosses with a few exceptions. You obviously can't pick up and throw every boss you see, and Sabelle is unaffected by corrosion, but that's pretty obvious. Bosses allow for multiple avenues to approach them due to how open-ended their designs are. Not every player will approach every fight the same way. For example, whenever I fight Gearworm, I tend to carry a shield on me so I can parry that big helm splitter move and grab onto him for a few backstabs. Also, Gearworm in general is just really cool. He has the ability to hack machines, so you'll often find him hacking turrets to fire at you during his fight. He even has an entire dungeon dedicated to this with traps you have to disable. I also love how you can still rip off the Gunfort's cannon and shoot the giant laser back at it. Zeracroix is an absolutely messed up fight if you approach it too early, but it's a great time when you actually get the hang of it. One of my favorite boss designs in this game is Gaze. She is a part of the Sovereign Axiom's strongest military unit, the Noin. If you try to fight her head-on, you will eventually cause her to bleed. However, her blood is actually corrosive acid that deals damage over time and ruins your defense value if it gets on you. Due to this, you would think you would have to fight her from a distance. However, Gaze is an expert sniper, so you don't exactly have the edge over her there either. It's not the toughest fight in the world, but it does punish you for not paying attention to its detail, and I really appreciate that. Some other things I liked were the side content. The side quests are mostly busy work, like stacking those goddamn boxes. But some of them do have recurring characters, and it is nice to get a larger picture of their lives by just seeing how their stories come together. Sure, Will is an asshole to you from the beginning, but understanding why you're escorting him through the desert does paint an entirely different impression of him. And it was cool seeing that kid who played pranks on you have a change of heart and eventually earn the Reclaimer's trust. In a way, it's similar to how Xenoblade X structured the writing of its own side content. Now, Overbullet is a very fun card game. Admittedly, it is just Marvel Snap at home, but it's still a good time. This honestly gave me a bit of nostalgia for card games like Final Fantasy VIII's Triple Triad, or Digimon World 3's card battles. Though, there's a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel on my channel, so I suppose card games just come with the territory. I do have some criticisms of the game, but majority of them are just minor nitpicks. For example, after you complete the story, You have the option of turning your party members on and off, but you don't get to choose who your party members are. So outside of boss rematches, you are stuck with Iris and Raven forever. I'm hoping that this gets adjusted someday for those who have a favorite they like exploring with. AI party members are also just kind of trash. I'm not saying they need to be perfect, but it's hard to recall a boss fight where they aren't just dead for 80% of it. It's not even worth reviving them. I solo everything if I must. If you play the game online enough, you will find some funky glitches. While I don't have footage of it, my friends did get stuck on that elevator that would take us to those underground dungeons that require the keycards, so we had to close out of the game entirely. Sometimes prompts for story progress wouldn't appear until we disconnected from each other, and also Ash showed up invisible in this cutscene, so it looked like a ghost was driving this car. The story of Titanic Scion isn't really its selling point. It definitely wants to spend less time giving you cutscenes and more time to just have fun playing it, which is respectable. Though there are a couple of things I wish the story would have addressed. This will be going into spoiler territory, so here's your warning. For one, Angel just sort of goes missing. She has a mental breakdown after revealing herself as the one leaking information to the Scion, and then you never see her again. So, any and all closure for her is just lost, and her story feels incomplete. The latter half of the game's story does delve into its own history with the events like the Great Collide that practically every Reclaimer and the Trinitas is linked to, and how Iris has the ability to provide a future for humanity and Outers alike. However, you only really learn bits and pieces of this through Raven's exposition. The details on this are pretty scarce, and I would have liked to learn more about it. More about Iris, more about the history of the Trinitas, more about how Ash lost his parents and his arm. It all just seems way more interesting and integral to the game's main story than, say, the protagonist's relationship with Nerve. While I can understand if the developers didn't want to drop an hour-long cutscene here, I can't help but feel like the title of Titanic Scion likely refers to characters like Iris and her potential to unite everyone more than anything else, and yet this is the side of the story that feels the most lacking. And then finally, there's Nerve. I don't dislike Nerve, but I don't really like him either. I don't feel anything for him, really. He's not much of a character as much as he just feels like a plot device to motivate the protagonist. He is your best friend, after all. Why? Well, because the game said so. Nerve doesn't get much screen time, and when he does, it's usually in some flashback sequence where he and the protagonist just talk a little bit. Apparently they grew up together in some orphanage, but that is about where the topic ends. There just isn't a whole lot for me to really grasp onto or to be invested in. So when the final chapters roll out and you find Nerve's remained within a mindless Centurion super soldier, the thing that Nerve had saved you from back in the beginning of the game, I just didn't feel anything when his death scene played out. It sort of reminded me of a certain death scene in Scarlet Nexus, but without any of the build-up or emotional weight behind it. Spoilers for Scarlet Nexus, by the way. So, Chapter 9, Yuito vs. Nagi, is my favorite fight in the whole game. Yuito and Nagi are best friends, but the game doesn't have to spell it out for you to know that. They bounce off each other naturally in their conversations so much that you can tell that they have been together for years. They're also often open to each other about personal things in their life, like their favorite merch, their future goals beyond being OSF soldiers, and even what girls they liked. It's honestly pretty wholesome. So, when the plot happens and Nagi is brainwashed and forced to kill his best friend, you have to be the one to put him down, and it genuinely felt like Yuito had lost someone close to him. To take this even further, Nagi was never going to beat Yuito anyway. He is a recurring boss fight, and his condition gets worse every time you see him. Nagi's brain just wasn't suited to handle the type of psionic power enhancement necessary to be on Yuito's level, and you can easily tell from his battle animations just how much he has to struggle and overexert himself just to keep up with him. His murder wasn't just tragic, but it felt unavoidable. Anyway, that is all I have on this game. It's still a fun time, and I'm playing it even now. I wouldn't even know what I would want added to this game because it already has so much as is. I didn't even go over the other video game-like secrets the game has, like the alternate dialogue options that give you different rewards based on your choices, the damaged beacons that show hidden treasure, the weather effects that alter your arsenal's performance, those secret gargoyle statues, or even that huge-ass tower. I'm also not terribly creative when it comes to designing custom arsenals as the greater parts of the community are. The game isn't perfect, but it's perfect enough for me, so I'm fine with calling this my game of the year. If you have any thoughts, please leave them in the comments. And finally, be safe, be kind, and be well.